Only when by the power of our hate we have truly shed the prison of our own flesh shall we be judged worthy to stand at the side of the returned Primarch. Every foe I slay, every stone I cast down, makes my hatred purer, and the day Ferrus Manus is restored to us a day closer. This was said by Iron Father Clanu Jorhar. Hello and welcome back to the Wisdom of Warhammer channel, and in today's video I'll be going over the history and structure of the 10th Legion Iron Hands. I will go over their time during the Great Crusade before Ferrus Manus was found, and then their time during the Great Crusade after Ferrus Manus was found. Then I will go over their time during the Horus heresy, and at the end I will go over the Legion structure during this time in Imperial history. Side note, like in my previous videos, I do not own the artwork in the video, and all things Warhammer under the ownership of Games Workshop and Black Library. So with the intro out of the way, let's get the video started, shall we? The history of the 10th Legion is a very well documented one because it was not one of those legions that worked in secrecy like other legions. The recruitment areas for them were pretty decent, but they mostly drew from the people of Old Albia, more specifically the war tribes of the area. They also drew recruits from the Quantiv Plate cities and Solus Stellix. This legion was one of the legions that had more planning preparation before they were unleashed. They were utilized in large legion task forces and are said to be remorseless and disciplined military force in the earliest years of service. They showed amazing coordination and heavily focused wrath as well, which would allow them to achieve their tactical objectives. When other legions or Imperial Guard fought alongside them, they were impressed and glad that the 10th Legion was one of the more disciplined legions. Their earliest known campaign was against a mutant warband called the Scythers, and the location for this battle was located in the Sol system. After a short time after this battle, they fought and exterminated the Xenos race called the Lyasax on the planet of Oberath. In both of these battles, the 10th Legion continued to show the remorseless and fiery but tactical assaults, but the legions and the Imperial Guard didn't know how they truly waged war. But their way of war would be revealed soon. The 10th Legion's way of tactical warfare would be shown against an orc-infested world named Planet 0234, which would be called Rust, which was located in the galactic northeast of Serapha. This orc empire was led by Wardog Kulo of the Crooked Claw, and this empire spanned over 60 star systems. Rogue trader Hendrik Zuckerman scouted out this orc empire and informed the Imperium, and when the Emperor heard about it, he realized he needed to have a multi-legion strike force for this war. With the Emperor at the head of the war fleets of 11 entire legions and over 100 Imperial Guard battle groups, alongside Titan assets and Mechanicus forces, the Seraphin offensive began. The Emperor and his war council planned to divide up the orc forces so they would not regroup. The 10th Legion, alongside other Imperial forces, systematically destroyed this orc empire while the Seraphine offensive went on. The 10th Legion slowly showed and refined their way of war, and on Rust they showed the mastered tactics of the 10th Legion. The Emperor had ordered them to be part of the liberation force of the human slaves on Rust alongside two other battle groups, the Urshan Elite and the Helgetentine Covenant of the Legio Cybernetica. During the Battle of Rust, the Lord Commander of the 10th Legion, named Achamendius Duquesne, showed the true might of the Old Albia war tactic called the Hammer and the Storm. I will explain this tactic, but it is a very simple but complex military tactic. Duquesne ordered the Urshan elites to fully deploy in between the three massive orc settlements. This would be the storm stage. From this action, the orcs stirred and charged the heavily entrenched Urshans, which was the plan to lure a massive bulk of the orc force. The first part of the battle lasted hours while the Urshan elites called for aid due to the endless tide of millions of orc warriors. Duquesne didn't respond because he wanted the orcs to fully commit. Seeing that the orcs committed to the destruction of the Russian soldiers, the 10th Legion hit very hard, and this would be the hammer stage. The entire Legion slammed hard into the orcs from orbit with dreadnoughts, armored companies, and gunships. This was an armored spearhead attack with many Malkador, Mauler, and Land Raider tanks, which destroyed orc vehicles and massive portions of the horde. In their shadows, the combat squads alongside the dreadnoughts marched in disciplined formation, walking through the storm that they had created from their hammer blow. The fast-moving vehicles of the 10th and the Legio Cybernetica rushed forward to relieve the pinned-down and overrun Urshan positions. After days of continuous fighting and near-endless waves of orcs, the 10th Legion and their allies had survived the assault, and the 10th Legion didn't lose as many legionaries as were expected. But the Urshans lost so many troops that they were out of the fight completely and ordered to guard the Legion landing zones and supply lines while the Legion continued to fight the Greenskins at their settlements. After the Battle of Rust, which was recorded as a great triumph in history due to the low casualty rate of the 10th Legion, their tactic was remorseless and very coordinated and had a frame of how it was used, which was one of armored spearheads. It was so good that the 4th and 13th Legions would use this kind of tactic in their legions, and from this, the 10th Legion would be called the Stormwalkers. Shortly after the destruction and extinction of the Crooked Claw Empire and the death of War Dog Kulo, the 10th Legion would get good news, and that news was that their Primarch was found on the planet of Medusa. Now, the 10th Primarch of the 10th Legion, Ferrus Manus, had landed on the dark gray world called Medusa, and his capsule had crashed deep into the mountains of Karashi, the ice pinnacle. The Primarch clash landed here, which made the entire world shake, and it was so bad that mountains were destroyed and new ones were created from this event. The lands where Ferrus landed was located in the uninhabitable part of the planet where extremely dangerous machine beasts roamed, and the 10th Primarch had survived this dark place. He fought the beasts, but there was one beast he struggled against, which was the Serpent of Living Metal called Azirnoth, and the battle between the two was long and hard for both of them. Eventually the Primarch held the metal beast in lava until it died, and from this his hands and forearms had become the living metal of the beast he had killed, and it was stronger than ceramite. Seeing the danger of these beasts, Ferrus went to the clans of Medusa to unite them in order to prepare them for the true threats, and we met the tribes the people had created the Canticle of the Travels. The Canticle of Travels was a series of legends of Medusan people, and when the tech priests heard of this, they would write down these stories when the Imperium would arrive. When the Emperor arrived to reunite with his son, only Ferrus went to meet with his father, and then for a whole day they fought, and when they clashed, it would shake the ground. When Ferrus returned to the tribes of Medusa, the Emperor was with him, and shortly after Ferrus met with his legion, he restructured it. He ordered the Terran legionaries to learn from these clans of his adoptive homeworld, and from this they would replace the chapter system and use the clan system. The legionaries would then replace the tribe leaders of Medusa with brute force, and with this the legion would be walking among the people of Medusa. To honor their father, the legion was named the Iron Hands, and each legionary would replace their right hand with a bionic, and new traditions would be introduced into the legion. For example, there was a new rank in the legion which was called the Iron Fathers, and this was a position in the tribes of people of Medusa, and they would maintain the machines from the Dark Age of technology. These Iron Fathers would serve as technomaries and eventually chaplains in the future, and they were highly revered and respected in the Legion. When the Iron Hands were ready to become the conquerors that they were destined to be, and with Ferrus at the head, it would be a good run. In a short time, Ferrus would meet his brother Fulgrim in the forge complex of the Uriels, with Fulgrim being surrounded by his Phoenix Guard. This was the first time they met, and the Phoenician boasted of his skills in the forge, and hearing that the Primarch of the Iron Hands then challenged him to a foraging contest. For a month, they would be crafting the weapon better than the other one. When they finished and showed their weapons, they both said that the other one was better, and to show a feat of brotherhood, they would exchange weapons. Ferrus would get Forge Breaker, a massive warhammer, and Fulgrim was given the Fire Blade. and sometime later, Ferrus would get the nickname from his brother, and it would be called the Gorgon. When Ferrus led his legion, they would be a literal engine of war, because they were an effective, dedicated, and subtle military force with a brutal and direct way of war. Their way of war would be refined and forged with the mind of their Primarch, and they quickly became one of the most effective legions in the early years of the Great Crusade. With the Gorgon at the head of the 10th Legion, they deepened their relationship with the Mechanicus, and from them being skilled in technology. But not all was good, because the Legion had become more rational and rigid, because the Gorgon was a harsh overlord and he was quick to anger, and he would request his sons to be the best that they could be. In short, failure was not an option, because failure was weakness, and weakness was considered a sin in the Iron Hands' eyes, and weakness was what led to Old Night. From this mindset, cold hate grew within the Iron Hands, and if there was weakness from either legionaries or aspirants, it would be snuffed out. The Iron Hands were mostly in the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet, with the Primarch Ferrus Manus at the head of the fleet. They would continue to build relationships with the Mechanicus and various Titan legions. They also had a good relationship with the 3rd Legion Emperor's Children, due to both legions striving for perfection, and they did have disdain for the 20th Legion, which was the Alpha Legion, due to how they waged war. During massive battles, the 10th Legion would serve as shock troops and senior elements in Imperial forces, and with the Primarch being at the front, he would serve as senior commander to lead all assets. The Iron Hands had a long record of battle, but they were mostly not recorded because they didn't care for the politics of the Imperium, they just wanted to conquer. They would be on the front lines of the Great Crusade with multiple battle groups and extermination operations, slaughtering the enemies of the Imperium. Also, they would bring lost human colonies into the Imperium and hand it over to the proper people. Now when the Ulnar Crusade was happening, the Gorgon and his sons were somewhere else fighting, and they would miss the battle against the Orcs and then the coronation of War Master Horus. Now, going into some of their battles during the Great Crusade, other than the battles of Obroth and Rust, the first campaign I will talk about is the war against the Lords of Gurnadal, which was a human empire that expanded a few star systems in the galactic east. This empire was a warlike aristocracy, and they had talks with imperial delegates with bodyguards from the Thousand Sons Legion. And while the talks were going on and being stalled, the Cardinal military was preparing for war. Sensing something was wrong during the talks, the Thousand Sons Guard killed the Cardinal delegates, and then the Imperials retreated due to their small numbers. Eventually, the 413th Expeditionary Fleet arrived, which was an Ultramarines war fleet under the command of Legion Master Ulaine Circeus, and waged war and conquered the outer worlds of this empire. They were not able to take Cardinal Prime and lost half a group of Demo Legion Titans and a lot of 13th Legion Marines and 500,000 Imperial Guard in this one battle. The Ultramarines called for aid, and the Gorgon and his legion answered alongside a force of Emperor's Children, and this war would end quickly with the tactical mind of the Primarch. The Emperor's Children were ordered to do a diversionary attack on the planet, which would cause panic and confusion, while the Iron Hands force had the clans of the 10th be divided. Each clan would be tasked with taking over one of the industrial zones of the planet, which would weaken the human empire. The Iron Hands assault was like their previous engagements. It was relentless and brutal, and with the damage they caused, the rulers of the Cardinal Empire surrendered. The Gorgon refused the offer, and the Iron Hands attack continued, and they were close to the end of the final battle, and then the Ultramarines force then asked to be the vanguard in the final attack on the Citadel. The Iron Hands accepted, but the 13th paid a heavy toll, but the Imperial attack was successful, and the Gorgon had conquered the planet. The final word of Ferrus was that it was done, and shortly after that, the 10th Legion and their father had left the system to find another war zone, while the 13th the Third did what they did best, deal with the politics. Now, the next war they fought in was a bit smaller than the war against the Gardenal Empire, but strike forces of 4 legions alongside Horus himself would fight in this conflict. This enemy was human, and it was against a warlord named Vital Gerion Terentius. But he was actually a warlord of the Imperium, and he had conquered worlds around the Halo Stars before he betrayed the Imperium. Vital had the respect of Malcador and a few of the Primarchs, and when he had betrayed the Imperium, many people were surprised and saddened due to his reputation. In response, Horus with his legion and the 8th, 10th, and 20th Legion Forces were sent to bring the worlds he brought into the Imperium back into the Imperium, and sent a message that all those who had ideas of betrayal would think twice. Horus and 50 of his Terminator elites teleported upon the ship of Vital and would take his head and then would dunk it in gold and send it to Terra with a message, "So perish all traitors." While the skull and message were sent to Terra, the Night Lords had been terrorizing the rebel planets, while the Alpha Legion dismantled the military power of the rebels. The Iron Hands, alongside the Ordo Reductor, which was a Mechanicus force, they used very dangerous weapons, and with these two forces combined, they would cause devastation and reduce entire worlds to ash. In the next major campaign, it would be called the Diasparax Persecution, which would involve the Iron Hands and Emperor's Children Legion, and they would be led by their Primarchs. The Diasparax was a nomadic empire that had a human and Xenos populace in society, and the Gorgon would try to convince the people of the Diasparax to join the Imperium and exterminate their Xenos allies, but they refused. Enraged, the Gorgon ordered the complete destruction of the Diasparax, including the humans, and the 10th Legion struggled even with their tactical mind of the Father. The reason for this was because the Diasparax was the better master in void warfare and would destroy a lot of Legion ships. Eventually, the Iron Hands and their Primarch called for aid from the Phoenician and his sons, and they answered, and this would be a turning point for the war. During one of the battles, Fulgrim's personal gunship would almost be destroyed, but thankfully the flagship of the Gorgon took the hit, preventing the death of Fulgrim. Instead of seeing this as a kind gesture, the Primarch of the Third saw it as a hit to his pride and ego, and from this, he would resent the Gorgon and his sons for what they did during this time. Now, the next war would be the last war before the Horus heresy, and it was against the Eldar, and this would require the Death Guard and Salamanders on the planet of Izabin/Caldera. It was a weird one because the Primarch of the 10th was having weird and horrifying dreams, and it was so bad that it disturbed the Primarch even when he was awake. The Gorgon needed to keep a hard face in front of the Primarch of the Death Guard while they had a disagreement. While he had these issues, his Iron Hands had to deal with the desert region of the planet, and they struggled due to the Imperial Guard not keeping up with them and the hit-and-run tactics of the Eldar. The Iron Hands and their Primarchs were angered with the weak and slowed Imperial Guard, who had issues with the conditions of the planet. From this hiccup, the Iron Hands mantra, "The flesh is weak," was true in this situation, and the Primarch and his sons then said if they were not able to keep up, they would be left behind. This Russian warfare would cause the 10th to overextend, and this would hurt the Legion during a battle in a deep valley. Here, how it went down. With a massive Legion force of Iron Hands with the Gorgon at the head, they would abandon the Imperial Guard force led by Bion Herikos that was attached to them. Due to the lack of scouts in the 10th, they would not be able to scout out the unknown part of the desert, and when a bulk of the Legion force arrived in this valley with high rock cliffs, they sent something off. That something was an Eldar witch spell that turned the bionics of the Iron Hands against themselves, while the Eldar aspect warriors would kill the Monkai elite warriors. After some fighting, Bion Henricos and his Imperial Guard force came in as the rear guard and assisted in saving the Legion force, which forced the retreat of the Eldar. After the battle, the Legion realized that their father was missing, and immediately the first captain, Gabriel Santor, and 15 Warlock Terminators went to look for their father. Shadrach Medusan was put in charge of the Legion while the hunt for their missing Primarch was happening, and they found the source of the Eldar witch spell at a complex and laid siege to it. The search party for the Gorgon found that he had been yanked by a teleport spell or teleport gadget and would track the signal down. While they continued to track the Primarch, Shadrach's force sieged the Eldar base and they were able to destroy it with the sacrifice of a lot of Imperial Guardsmen. Henrico's force was about to be exterminated, but the Gorgon appeared alongside Santor and the Morlocks, and from this it turned the tide, and the Iron Hands and their allies won the day. Impressed with the deeds of the Imperial Guard, the Iron Hands accepted them as adopted sons of Medusa, and these guardsmen were called the Chain Veil, and they would remind the 10th Legion, saying that all flesh is not weak. After the battle in the desert, the Gorgon then led his sons in the Chain Veil into the forest region, and they would fight until the Primarch of the 18th, Vulcan, would declare the world corruptible and would cleanse it in fire. Continuing on with the history of the 10th Legion, we have gotten to the part of the video that will go over the 10th Legion's time during the Horus Heresy. Now, as time went on, the Iron Hands was known to bottle up their emotions just like their father, and this would backfire on them soon. Shortly before the drop site massacre, Fulgrim and a fleet of Emperor's children would meet with the Gorgon and the fleet of Iron Hands, and the two brothers would talk. Everything seemed fine until the 3rd Legion fleet fired upon the 10th Legion fleet. The 10th Legion took up defensive positions as the fleet took a lot of damage. While this happened, the Gorgon had woken up after his brother had knocked him out, and then him and his Phoenix Guard had killed all of the Morlocks except first Captain Gabriel Santor. After the traitor fleet retreated to the Isfahan system, the Gorgon had sent a message to the Emperor about what happened. Thankfully, the Emperor was informed about the betrayal of War Master Horus, and he had ordered 9 legions to bring the traitor Primarchs to Terra in chains. The Iron Hands, Raven Guard, and Salamanders and their Primarchs would be in the first wave, and when 3 legions arrived, the Gorgon had planned the assault. The Raven Guard took one side, while the Salamanders took another side, but when Ferrus saw Fulgrim, all plans went out the window. The 10th Legion and their Primarchs slammed into the frontally heavily defended Emperor's children, while the other legions fought their opponents. This battle was extremely bloody for the first battle of the heresy, with the Iron Hands cutting down the Emperor's children. While these 2 legions fought, the Morlocks defended their father while he fought his Phoenician brother, and they were successful for a time, but they would be cut down one by one. To make the situation worse, a demon in the blade of Fulgrim took over and used the body of the silver-haired Primarch to cut his brother's head off. Seeing their Primarch dead, the Legion retreated and were gunned down alongside the 2 other first-wave legions by the second-wave legionaries, but they were able to escape Isfahan after surviving. With all the high-ranking members of the Iron Hands Legion dead, including the first captain, a massive group of Iron Hands had returned to Medusa to create the Medusan Council. This council was composed of Iron Fathers who survived the Dropside Massacre, and they would eventually be renamed the Iron Council. These Iron Hands had recruited and brought up new legionaries, and they would wage a mini-war against the Wordbearers called the Bitter War. They would unleash weapons during the Bitter War, and these dark weapons would be from the weapons vaults that were called the Gates of Hell, and could be only opened with the keys to Hell. Now you are wondering what is the history of the Gates of Hell, and I will explain what that is another time, but the weapons that were unleashed from these vaults would be horrifying even to the cold and logical Iron Hands. But there was another group of Iron Hand survivors who were waging a guerrilla war against the traitors, and they were under the command of Shadrach Medusan, Erlach Baranthan, and later Cadmus Tyro. There were smaller forces of Iron Hands that were grouped up with survivors of the Raven Guard and Salamanders. The Iron Hands did hold resentment for the 18th and 19th Legions because if they hadn't retreated, the traitors would have been destroyed. But with the 3 legions sharing the traumatic Dropside Massacre, they worked together and they would be one of many thorns in the side of the traitors. The Iron Hands only did guerrilla warfare during the heresy and didn't participate in the Siege of Terra, but I will explain the more notable battles and skirmishes during the heresy. I will start with the assault of Yidris, and this was shortly after the drop site massacre, and it involved a small fleet of Iron Hands and Raven Guard. Shadrach Medusan was one of the commanders aboard the Sisypheum, and this group of the Shattered Legion stalked the Iron Warriors and Perturabo, as well as the Emperor's Children and Fulgrim to the Crone world of Idris. They attempted to kill the two Primarchs while the traitors were fighting off the Eldar Wraith constructs, but the Warbanner of the Shattered Legions failed, and they retreated. Now this next battle was a massive victory for the Loyalists, and it involved the Iron Father Autek Mor of the infamous clan Morgul. His clan force would attack the World Eater's recruitment world of Bot. Now, this showed the cold brutality of the Iron Hands, and there was a detachment of Imperial Fists and Solar Auxilia that served in the Manchean War. The first thing that the Iron Father ordered was to throw the moon of Bot at the planet, which is crazy, but this would be part of his plan. When the moon was burning in the atmosphere of the planet, it definitely confused the traitors that were stationed there. With that sight in place, the true assault would begin. Orbital drop pods screamed down, filled with vengeful Iron Hands and other Loyalist forces, but with the remaining defense batteries, they were able to destroy a lot of the Loyalists. When the forces landed, they would ram into the traitors and rip through the defenses with heavy fire and would establish a landing zone for more troops. While the Iron Hands and Imperial Fists dealt with the World Eaters, the Solar Auxilia would form a defensive line against the traitor Mechanicum, who would be on its way to reinforce their allies. Now, there was a phase of the operation that only the Iron Father knew about, and he would order his Morlocks to follow him into the deep part of the planet while their allies fought the traitors. With the final hours of the planet almost here, and its death would be its moon, as it grew brighter and brighter, Mor needed to hurry up, and he would eventually emerge with his bodyguards. He looked up at the moon coming closer and said one word, retreat, and all Loyalists did. All Loyalists got clear of the impact while the traitors were crushed by the moon, and this ended the Battle of Bot, as well as the death of the planet of Bot. The next conflict was on the fort of Omnamat, which was located in the Ultima Segmentum, and the Mechanicus located here fell into civil war, which brought a Sons of Horus contingent to the planet. Thankfully, a force of Iron Hands from the job site massacre had arrived, but the fighting was so bad that the Forge World was destroyed, and rumors say that the fires still burn on today. Now, this next battle was one of the battles I talked about in the History of the Iron Warriors video, which is the Battle of Talaran. This battle was the biggest armored battle to this day in the history of the Imperium, and it involved millions of tanks, and you may be wondering why. The reason why it was a tank battle was because the Iron Warriors and their Primarch had virus bombed this planet to a point where if anyone, even Astartes, were out in the open, they would be consumed by the viruses. The Loyalist forces consisted of only Iron Hands and Imperial Fists, and when the battle ended, which was a victory of the Loyalists, and as the Imperial Fists and Iron Hands looked at the millions of wrecked tanks upon the field, they would never forget it. Now here is a battle they may be surprised about in the Horus Heresy, is the Siege of Baal, but it only had a small force of Iron Hands alongside a group of Salamanders, some Blood Angels, and Imperial Fists. This battle was sometime after the Cygnus campaign, and a force of Emperor's Children, Sons of Horus, and Dark Mechanicus forces attacked Baal. The Loyalists waged guerrilla war against the traitors for more than several years, but they were able to win the war, and Baal is still the homeworld of the Blood Angels to this day. Now, the Iron Hands did participate in the Great Scouring, but we do not have the details of the operations that they participated in. Now, going into the structure of the Iron Hands Legion, we have the Primarch Ferrus Manus at the top, and under him are the clan leaders or Iron Lords. The clan leaders were the leaders of different clans of the Iron Hands, and these clans originated on Medusa, and these clans were pocket legions and were self-sufficient. They were under the command of the Iron Fathers, which were called the Praetors of the Iron Hands, and these clans were competitive for the attention of the Primarch. Now, going over the different clans of the Iron Hands, they all had different specialties, of course, but sadly we don't know all of their specialties. Starting off with Clan Atraxi, which was one of the higher ranking clans, and one of the more notable members was named Garavan Torvig, who was the co-commander of this clan, and their symbol was a half man and half machine skull, which was very similar to the cult Mechanicus. Clan Borgar was known for having assault marines, which are jump-pack troops of the Astartes, and were one of the more notorious clans, even by Manusan standards. They would be single-minded and known to slaughter everything to the last, and their clan symbol is unknown. Clan Felg was a clan during the Great Crusade and Horus heresy, and their symbol was a three-pronged trident within a cog. Clan Cataran was one of the oldest clans during the Great Crusade and Horus heresy, and they had a lot of Terrans within this clan, and their symbol is unknown. Now, Clan Morgul was a clan of outcasts and the most unstable Iron Hands, and I have already talked about one of them, named Autek Mor, and he was both Iron Lord of the clan and Iron Father. Autek was a merciless commander, and those who served under him knew this and still fought and died for him. The Primarch didn't really like Autek and this clan, but he saw their use, and their symbol was a clawed talon of a raptor within a cog. Clan Unavagavar was another clan company that we don't have info on, but they did serve in the Great Crusade and Horus heresy, and their symbol was a two-headed serpent within a cog. Now, these were the major clans, but there were minor clans, and like a majority of the Iron Hands, major clans, we don't know who they were due to the lack of info and records. Clans were pretty much like the companies of other legions, and with simple hierarchy, like the Iron Lords and Iron Fathers are the commanders at the top, and their council of advisors. Under them are the specialized troops or basic line Astartes, and multiple armored vehicles and gunships, and all Iron Hands are skilled engineers and know their way around vehicles and tech. The Iron Hands had the most advanced armored vehicles, and they were largely similar to the Iron Warriors, but with the Iron Hands' relationship with the tech cults of Mars, they were able to get the good stuff and more knowledge. Now, going into more detail of the Iron Fathers, they were a mix of tech marine and eventually chaplain, but they were the voice of reason for the Iron Hands that they served alongside. There were a lot of notable Iron Fathers, and I will list them off, starting off with Autek Mor, who we talked about. Then we have Ares Votek, Arna Kran, Diedrich, Frater Thamaka, Jezez, Aug, and Cardosia, who was a dreadnought. Now, the Iron Hands Legion was the second legion that had the most dreadnoughts, right behind the Dark Angels. The Iron Hands had looked at the Marines who became dreadnoughts as the pinnacle of their version of perfection, and eventually they would use dreadnoughts as advisors and spiritual guides. They did have a fleet, but we do not know the true number, but all ships of the 10th Legion were in the 52nd Expeditionary Fleet, and the flagship of the Gorgon was there, and it was called the Fist of Iron, but sadly we don't know what happened to it. But with that being said, that is the structure of the 10th Legion during the Great Crusade and Horus Heresy. Now we have gotten to the end of the video on the history and structure of the Iron Hands Legion. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, hit the like button and share it with someone who would like this content. If you are new and would like to see more, hit the subscribe button and bell notification to be notified for when a new video comes out. I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next video, which will be a surprise, so keep an eye out for that. Now, this is Wisdom of Warhammer, signing off.